so powerful that their officers couldn't do anything without checking with them first. The same in Germany. Throughout the end of World War I, towards the end of World War I, you saw growing strikes and protests, including a general strike by German workers in February of 1918 that called for peace without annexation, and you saw mass desertions of up to 1 million soldiers. And then in October 1918, a sailors' rebellion spreads around the country, and by the 5th of November, a general strike has been called, and sailors have occupied the shipyards. It's not just in Russia and Germany in World War I that this happened. During the Vietnam War, there was something known as fragging, which was where basically, if soldiers thought that their officers were leading them into a situation that was going to get them killed, or if, to be honest, they were just had enough of their officers, they used to just shoot them and then claim the Vietnamese had done it. There's an absolutely fantastic story about one group of officers who come back from patrol. They sit down in a trench. They get a joint out. An officer comes over to try and tell them that you can't smoke cannabis while you're at war, and they shoot him, chuck his body over the trench, and then get on the phone and say, "Oh, the Vietnamese have shot the captain." So it's certainly possible, for mass uprisings to kind of split the army, and in that situation, it does reduce the need for violence. So in the October Revolution in Russia in 1917, there's a sort of left-wing urban legend that says more people died making the film about the storming of the Winter Palace and actually died storming the Winter Palace. I don't know if it's true. If anyone can verify that it is, I would be happy. But nevertheless, it was a relatively non-violent affair. Having said that, arms were still used. They sailed the battleship up the river and so on, and most people did have weapons of some kind. But weapons were not, the key thing. The key thing was that the vast majority of Petrograd, which was then the Russian capital, supported the transfer of power to the Soviets. So in the Russian Revolution, the question of violence, they did use violence, but it was a tactical one. They didn't make a principle out of either violence or non-violence. And I think really, on answering the question, do we need violence? I think that's what it is for us as well. Marx talks about the emancipation of the working class as the act of the working class. What that means is that what we see as being the key to human liberation is the vast majority of us who, do everything, imposing our will on the very small minority at the top of society who are currently making a right mess of just about everything. And I think in a revolution, we would insist on the right to defend that revolution violently if necessary, but, hopefully the power of, the workers' movement, the sides of the revolution would mean that violence would actually be relatively minimal, and then, that would allow us to go on and build a society that doesn't produce the grotesque levels of violence that we see under capitalism today.
Now we're going to break up into groups of 5 or 6 people, just like with the people around us, like a group here, and discuss. We've got some questions if team members could hand them up as well, the different groups.
You don't have to discuss questions, it's just to give you a sort of idea if you are all sat there and you have to talk about it.
10 minutes to check with yourselves about
How would you respond to the accusation that we're
I tried to
more minutes left in discussion. So the second half of this meeting, we're going to start one with now. What now is going to happen is that if people want to raise their hands when they have a discussion, I hope the discussions in the groups has gone well. I'll pick people out, and someone, Molly, will come round with the microphone, and if you just speak into it, keep contributions to 3 minutes. I'll tap on the table when it gets to 2 minutes, so you know you've just got a minute remaining. Yeah. Left button at the bottom. One of that? Yeah.
Hello? That's really, that always freaks me out, I'm really sorry. My name's Alex. I'm a coordinator with Extinction Rebellion in Norwich, in my local area. And being down in London in the April Rebellion really taught me a lot about non-violence. So like before, I was quite critical of non-violence because I think there was a tendency amongst myself and amongst a lot of socialists to have a really silly binary conception of violence and non-violence, when actually it's not a dichotomy, it's not two opposing counterpoints. It's a spectrum, like it's a toolbox, right? So non-violence I used to think it just meant A to B marches and petitions, where I never even thought about the fact that non-violence paradoxically can be actually quite forceful. There's actually, if you can use non-violence, if I may be provocative, in a violent sense. By that I mean like to say like, if you get thousands of people to sit on the street, that's a great application of force. And if you refuse to move for days on end, that's really powerful. Likewise, violence is a spectrum as well. Like it ranges from like throwing an egg at Nigel Farage or throwing a milkshake at fascists to like a full-on revolution. And I think like this consistent oppositional strain that we might always want to put in it is really unhelpful way of thinking about it. It's a spectrum. So yeah, that's all I can say really.
Sorry, I'm just gonna translate for one into English.
네, 저는 한국의 노동자연대고 SWP 자매조직이 노동자연대에서 활동하고 있는 학생입니다.
So I'm a student from South Korea, a member of SWP's sister organization, Worker Solidarity. I'm a socialist. Yeah.
사회 변화가 필요하다는 것에 대해서는 여기 계신 모든 분들이 다들 동의를 할 거라고 생각을 합니다. 여기에서도 어떻게 그 사회를 바꿀 것인가가 사실 핵심 문제이고 그 문제는 국가를 어떻게 바라볼 것인가 하는 문제로 이어질 수밖에 없다고 생각을 합니다. 그런데 저는 우리가 저항에 나설 때마다 우리를 탄압하는 국가가 절대로 중립적이지가 않고 계급으로 분단된 이 체제를 유지하는 지배계급의 수단이라는 점이 굉장히 중요하다고 생각을 합니다.
I think everyone who's sitting in this room will agree that we need a social change, but at the same time, there is a different way, different approaches in reaching that goal. But at the same time, the state is the agency of the violence, and they act to crush the resistance because the state is not a neutral entity. It protects the interest of the ruling class.
발제자의 발표에 대해서 굉장히 동의하는 점은 점진적으로도 급진적으로도 변화를 도모하려는 그 마음을 실현하기 위해서는 국가의 도전을 해야 된다는 점입니다. 그런데 국가가 굉장히 집중돼 있고 또한 경찰과 군대라는 그 조직이 바로 이 국가가 집중돼 있다는 것을 입증하는 수단이자 여기에서 저는 폭력의 문제가 바로 나온다고 생각을 합니다.
Either in a gradual way or radical way, we need to challenge the state in order to deliver change. But the state itself is very centralized. So in order to challenge the state, that we need to be centralized and be organized at the same time. But at this, the police and the army is the main tool that the state and the ruling class maintains its control.
3년 전에 남한에서도 강력한 대규모 투쟁이 대통령을 날린 바가 있습니다. 이 운동은 촛불운동, 비폭력운동이라고도 불렸고 실제로 폭력은 있지는 않았었습니다. 아쉽게도 노동자들이 헤게모니를 계속 쥐지는 못했지만 그래도 공공부문 노동자들이 파업을 벌이면서 그 투쟁에 포문을 여는 바가 있었고 강력한 대중운동으로 대통령을 날릴 수가 있었습니다. 이미 당시의 지배계급은 분열해 있는 상태였지만 결국에는 이 운동이 너무 강력했기 때문에 다른 지배계급을 좀 더 그래도 온건하지만 사실은 우익인 그런 그 대통령을 당선하는 것으로 이 의견을 모았습니다. 대중운동의 성과였습니다. 그런데 원래 이 부패했었던 대통령을 방어했었던 이 지배계급은 시위대를 향한 발포를 논의한 바가 있었습니다.
So 3 years ago in South Korea, there was a huge mass demonstrations that ousted our former president, but it was the workers who actually initiated the movement, which was mainly from the public sector workers, and it developed into a mass protest. Millions and millions of people protesting for months and months until the president was impeached. But at the time, the ruling class was divided. And as the resistance was so powerful that we managed to change the regime into a more liberal government, but at the same time the working class wasn't, the struggle of the working class wasn't strong enough to push for a more radical change. But at the time, the ruling class of South Korean capitalism actually considered deploying the army to the protesters, and they have actually planned out to fire live ammunition towards the peaceful protesters.
즉 제가 생각했을 때는 마무리를 하자면 만약에 발포를 했다면 어떻게 될 것인가 하는 문제가 굉장히 사활적이고 현실적인 문제이고 물론 지배계급을 첨예한 상황을 바라지 않았기 때문에 대중운동이 너무나도 강력했고 따라서 발포를 하지는 않았지만
setting off a nuclear bomb is obviously far is obviously down one end of the spectrum and is obviously many millions more times worse than punching somebody in the face. Having said that though, it's often when it comes to the question of what is violence and what is not, actually the ruling class will often they are often the ones that, and for want of a better phrase, get to kind of decide what is violence and what isn't. I was remember like a few years ago in America where the Black Lives Matter movement kicked off, and you had people demonstrating against police shootings of unarmed black men, and the sort of right-wing media in America and Fox News went absolutely apoplectic because people were blocking roads and they were saying apparently this is a form of violence, and you're going because they were blocking, because the protesters were blocking traffic. I mean, it was ridiculous, but it gives you an idea of I mean, in a sense, the hypocrisy of the ruling class when it comes to violence as well. I mean, the other example is the case of Ahed Tamimi. If people don't know who she was, she's probably about 17 now, but she was, when she was 16, she's a girl that lives in the West Bank in Palestine, and basically some Israeli soldiers came sort of barging into her house and she punched one of them in the face. Now, I mean, it was absolutely, incredible, thing to do. Pictures and video footage of it went all around the world, and I think it was a really powerful image. But the Israeli military sent her to months in an Israeli prison because they were decrying it as this, terrible act of violence, despite the fact that obviously the soldier that she punched was, heavily armed grown man, and she was, 16. And I think the other kind of point I want to stress, and I think, people are right to say, people who contribute are right to say that the key thing is not, like what Amy said, is a movement violent, or is it, not? We didn't, I think when Extinction Rebellion kicked off, we didn't all sit there going, right, we're going to wait until they punch 20 people, and then we'll go and get involved. No, that is not the question, at all. The question is, does it, the question is, how do we build, that mass action against climate change, racism, war, sexism, and so on? Because people are right, it is, that mass action by people that absolutely does make the difference. I remember a few years ago, when the EDL attempted to march in Tower Hamlets, we didn't stop them either by going around in small groups looking to beat them up, or actually by appealing to the police and the Home Office, as some people did, to ban the demonstration. What we did is we built a coalition of the SWP, Labour Party members, other people on the left, trade unionists, the mosques, faith groups, LGBT groups and so on, and we put thousands of people in front of the East London Mosque and we said they aren't bloody coming in, and they didn't. And you see that actually strategy in anti-fascism, when that is used and when we have the numbers on our side, we're able to block the fascists from marching. People may have heard of the Battle of Cable Street, where people in the East End stopped most of these fascists marching through. And I remember hearing one time about a guy who was interviewed in the aftermath and asked, you were at Cable Street, what was it like? And he said, well, it was actually quite boring because there were so many people there that we were all just kind of stood there. And so the people at the front were, the ones fighting the police who were trying to clear a path for the fascists to get through. And everyone else blocking the street was just kind of stood there. On the question of, so I think really you have to see that as the key thing. On the point that people, raised about the question of, violence, in particular in a particular revolutionary situation, this question of the violence of the oppressed. People are right. We absolutely do support that. To be honest, in revolutions, it tends to. There are different ways that people, manage to the sort of practical steps that people sort of take to overcome, the violence of the state. I think there was one struggle somewhere, to the mass protest, it might have been South Korea actually, I can't actually remember, but where they basically, the workers that made the police's sort of riot gear, they all went on strike, so they nicked the riot gear and put it, oh no, it's Portugal actually, so they nicked the riot gear and put it on. And so I think the question, I think, just to kind of conclude, because I think we're running out of time, I think, people are absolutely right when they say that the key is, mass action and the power that workers have to change society. Because you think about, if workers produce everything under capitalism, that gives them an enormous amount of power. And people think, when the tube drivers go on strike, the whole of London shuts down. And so I think, our task is to sort of build, all of those struggles against racism, climate change, austerity, and so on. And with whoever we can. If someone wants to, fight back, then fantastic. And the first question is not what do you think about violence. And the final thing to say is just, well, the importance. I think a couple of people mentioned the importance of being organised, and I would absolutely agree, because particularly in times when the level of, the struggle is very high, but also, whenever it is important to be organised, and over the course of Marxist Festival, if you agree with what we say, then people should think about joining us. I'm going to shut up. I think we're out of time.
And in 12 years, actually, it's just that we had 12 years left to bring our carbon emissions down to zero as a rich and developed country. While I have no idea how that translated into we're about to die, it still didn't add up to me. Of course, with Brexit, we weren't even able to vote, and many of us accepted the fact that we were now facing a very uncertain future. With this issue, however, we were taught as children to recycle paper to save trees and to turn the lights off to save energy. So why is it that suddenly now we're coming to a realization about exactly how much more of an issue this is? And why aren't politicians saying anything? And why aren't they doing anything? Why is it that we, as children, were told about climate change, told about how it's got the capability to destroy us and the world as we know, how it's an existential threat, but we're still burning fossil fuels and acting as if nothing's wrong with that at all. It doesn't make sense, there's no logic, it's wrong. And if we need to stop the emissions, then we need to stop the emissions, so they've got to stop. But of course, no one cared about the future we had to face. So we went on strike. And after a minute at first, we did not expect the turnout that we got when we first started planning for it. I thought maybe 100 people would turn up, let's say maybe 500. 15,000 showed up. And the month after, 50,000 showed up. No matter how many riot vans wanted to pull up on the first strike day, no matter how they tried to scare people with arrests, the police couldn't even stop a bunch of kids from climbing on top of buses, taking over Parliament Square and its surrounding streets, and singing "Oh, renewable energy" as they did so. It felt empowering. And up to now, we've managed to get Parliament to declare a climate emergency and the government to commit to reaching a net zero carbon economy by 2050. But what the government has still failed to understand is that we need to cut our carbon emissions down to zero in 5 to 11 years, so that people in poorer countries can have a chance to heighten their standards of living by building some of the infrastructure that we've already built, like clean drinking water or electricity. 2050 is in 31 years compared to that. And for some reason, we don't ever think past 2050 when we think of our future. We never think about 2060, 2070, 2090. If I live to 100, I'll be alive until 2103. But the sixth mass extinction that we're in the midst of is speeding up, and it's speeding up fast. So I want everyone here to think to themselves, what does the future look like? Is it bright or is it bleak? Does it look like a safe and stable future for you, for your children, for your grandchildren, for your friends and family? What does it look like realistically, taking into account what kind of future is being built now and, with today's emission speed? What would you be willing to do to secure a better future? We've been striking every month since February. We've had an incredible amount of influence, unexpectedly, and even got loads of mentions at G20. We've completely changed public opinion and brought the climate crisis to one of the public's top concerns, next to immigration and Brexit. We've changed the course of UK politics. And 19th of July will be our last youth strike, at least for now. I want you to go back to that question of what you'd be willing to do to secure a better future for yourselves. In August, we won't be striking, but instead we're going to be preparing and building for something this country has not seen since 1926. On the 20th of September, we're calling for a general strike. And on the 27th, hundreds of other countries around the world will join us. Thank you.
And I think in the UK, we have seen the massive and disgusted hostile environment created by our government. And I'm incredibly proud to introduce Melanie Strickland, a member of Standard 15,
He was charged with terror offences, which I thought was kind of only reserved for Muslims, but hey, for stopping a deportation flight.
Thank you. Great to see so many friends in the room. Thank you very much for the welcome. A bit about me. I've also been a climate activist for many, many years. In 2015, I did an action at Heathrow Airport, and after I finished my community service from that action, I started volunteering at my local migrant centre in North East London, and it was there that I saw with my own eyes the depth of human misery and suffering in my own community. The people that were coming to the centre were mainly women of colour with little children, and these were people who lived a street away from me in many cases. So there were people that I may have walked past in the street. So seeing all that suffering and poverty and illness in my community, when I was approached by some of my friends, some of whom were also involved in the Heathrow action, about a proposal to stop a deportation flight, I thought, yeah, that's something that's really worthwhile. When you think about the private companies that are involved in the detention and deportation process, it's clear that this is an issue of racist capitalist oppression. The global oppressed are those who stand to lose most as well from the ecological crisis that we face. And when you look at deportations in this country, people are largely being sent to former Commonwealth countries. So it's clear to me that this is a new form of colonial oppression. So after a number of conversations with my comrades from Plain Stupid, Lesbians and Gay Support the Migrants, and End Deportations, we came up with a plan, and we implemented our plan on 28th of March 2017, and we successfully stopped a deportation flight to Nigeria and Ghana. That was really like the best thing I've ever done in my life. I've got absolutely no regrets about it. As a direct result of the action, I know from a Freedom of Information request that I just got back the other day that 11 people remain in this country, and four of them have status. So trafficking survivors, people who have successfully won their asylum claims, and parents of dependent children. So, that's truly the best thing I could have done in my life. And it's not just the people who, were going to be forcibly deported that night, but it's their families and the people in their communities, their loved ones. So many people have the opportunity to rebuild their lives here as a result of that action. So the whole action, the whole process has taught me a lot. I mean, it's still ongoing for us because we got convicted of a terrorism-related offence at the end of last year, ironically on International Human Rights Day. And although we didn't get prison sentences, which I think that is fully down to the strength of support and solidarity that we had, it still had a massive impact on our lives. We don't have an appeal day, and the whole legal process is likely to go on and on. But I do feel that it's taught me that solidarity first, revolutionary action in parallel with or second to solidarity with with our comrades, with people in our community against racist oppression. And I wanted to end with a quote by one of my heroines, Angela Davis, who says that you have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. Thank you.
Brand new culture tent, and if you can tell by my voice, my own voice, we're incredibly excited to have it. It's going to be located in the Rad Square, which is around that way, from that way. So please go to it, it'll be set up tomorrow. Our next speaker is Dave Marutu, a UCU member, anti-racist activist, who was sacked by his college for opposing the racist prevent agenda.
Thank you. I bring solidarity greetings from Samuel College, UCU. And as said, I worked there a month ago. I was sacked. I'll tell you what happened to me. I was doing some casework in the college because I'm a branch secretary there. And it was a new member, a black woman, who came to me, and she'd been suffering racist bullying, really awful stuff. And she'd been to management before she came to me, and they pretty much said she was oversensitive and making it up. So this meeting was pretty awful. I really was very frustrated when I left it. I walked past a Prevent poster. I walked past hundreds of times, never liked it. And the college know how I feel about Prevent, and they know our union start with Prevent. We think it is racist. But on this day, out of frustration, I took a pen to it and I wrote racist across it. Thank you for the applause, but I know it's not the greatest thing to do. I like to think of myself as quite a strategic branch officer. That wasn't the best thing to do. But I was then called to an investigation meeting a couple of weeks. Actually, no. About an hour later, after I talked for an hour, I calmed down. I went back and I thought, well, I need to take the poster down. But it had gone. So I was called to an investigation meeting 2 weeks later, confronted with this poster. I immediately owned up to it. I apologised for my methods. Didn't apologise for calling Prevent racist, because it is racist. And I then also wrote a letter to apologise for my methods, but I was called to disciplinary hearing and I was sacked, summarily dismissed. And I've been a branch officer and a caseworker for 20 years, and I've never known someone to be summarily dismissed. Usually they get their notice, but they were particularly spiteful with me. But this really wasn't about me writing on that poster. It was about victimisation. Because I am branch secretary of a successful branch. We have spent the last 5 years fighting against our employer and winning. And they don't like that. They particularly don't like that. And they particularly don't like a black critical voice who is there to challenge them. So in the last 5 years, what we've achieved is we had incremental payments suspended for 5 years, and we organised, tripled our branch membership, and threatened them with strike action, and got our incremental payments put back on, and in the process gained 3 extra weeks of holiday. We then went for their really awful lesson observation scheme, which was all about performance management and all about bullying teachers. So we took strike action, we boycotted it. It took a year of boycott, but we negotiated a collaborative, supportive lesson observation scheme. And then in the last year, We took 5 days of strike action, and if you remember last year, this strike action was in the Beast of the East. It was pretty awful on that picket line. It was really cold. So we really struck hard to get a 6.5% pay rise over 3 years. It doesn't sound big, but if you think of FE, we haven't had a pay rise above 1% for the last 10 years. And what happened after that is that we broke the logjam. Colleges around the country started getting pay rises bigger than 1%. And we did that at Sandwell. We worked hard to do that, and that's the fantastic branch I work for. But what also this is about, it's not just about victimisation, it's about the prevent duty. The prevent duty is a terrible, ill-conceived strategy that the government used to victimise and other Muslim community in our schools, colleges and universities. I'll give you a couple of examples. There was a Muslim student at Stafford University who was studying international relations. He took out a book on terrorism, international terrorism. He was then reported to Prevent. He was then harassed. He was harassed so much that he gave up his course. There have been school children as young as 3 or 4 who've been questioned without their parents under Prevent. I got a message of support from a parent who has an 11-year-old son who, in the playground, and she used the term, was having some banter with some friends, a Muslim student, and he was questioned under Prevent. And so she really struggled with that. So it's really good that we're opening up that discussion about Prevent again. But it's also about institutionalised racism, the fact that black workers are called to disciplinary more often and given bigger sanctions. So it's good to be able to talk about institutionalised racism, because often if you talk about that in the workplace, that's the point where they start to get rid of you. They've already got rid of me, so I can talk about it. But what was fantastic was a couple of weeks ago, I was having a bit of a low day, and I got phone calls from my branch, not just committee members, but ordinary branch members, telling me, we've done it, we've re-elected you as branch secretary. And we're going to move to ballot for strike action. That ballot is ongoing now, and I think we're going to win it. What that branch is saying to management is we're not going to take this victimisation. We're not going to have our victories rolled back. They are prepared to fight, and not just that, they are prepared to win. Solidarity.
Racism, but we also have to continue the fight against sexism. And I'd love to introduce our next speaker, Linda Rio-Howe, a Unison member who struck with thousands of women in Glasgow for equal pay.
Thank you everyone for inviting me here tonight to yet again talk about the Equal Pay campaign and strike in Glasgow last year. For 12 years, the women, and it was mainly women doing the women work, the cleaning, the catering, the education support staff, all the roles that women tend to do to fit around family life and all the things that we do. For 12 years, we were paid unfairly, and everyone in Glasgow City Council knew this. They'd introduced a pay scheme where they protected the male role jobs, and the women's jobs never got to rise above what was, it was unjust. So for 12 years, the council took us out to tribunal after tribunal. They kept trying to dispute the fact that it was wrong. It was just wrong. And every day, the women and men went to work, did the jobs with a plume, with a smile on their face, but in the background was all the legalities around. Were we getting unfairly paid? Yes, we were. So as a trade union, Unison in Glasgow, GMB, and we've also got Action for Equality who are supporting all the claimants in Glasgow, which there were 14,000 people, with 14,000 claims against the council. The council were very, very well aware. So across the city, all the branches, all the members, we started to get a bit busy around what can we do. So last year we took a consultative ballot in our branch, and the figures for the people who are the lowest paid doing the catering and cleaning jobs, home care and education support, the numbers were resounding, the return votes were resounding. So the council came back and thought, God, they're going to go on strike, they've got us over a barrel. So they came back to us within 24 hours of our consultative ballot, announced the returns, and we'll have more effective talks. Now I don't know what they've been talking about for all this time, but in our branch what we decided was, well, they're talking, we're going to get busy. So we started to order up some t-shirts and make placards over summer, and there was just this air of discontent and people thinking, we truly believed in solidarity of each other. We quadrupled our membership in the Cordia, that was an arm's length organisation. So people started to really start to believe that we could, the members of a trade union, and people who wanted to just come along as well. So, you know, it was like a carnival atmosphere across Glasgow. And the council was sitting going, we had loads of demonstrations outside the city chambers, and each time people saw it in the paper or on Twitter or whatever it was going across, it started to build and grow, and the momentum was there. And do you know what? The belief was there that the lowest paid people were strike ready. And the council, I think, thought, they're not going to do this. So in the morning of Tuesday, 23rd of October, 8,000 women, predominantly women, shut the city down. Primary school in the city. It was fantastic. It was 1 week after the kids had the October School Week. So the kids were all loving it. They were out the picket lines with us. They had their t-shirts, homemade strike t-shirts on them, their wee tuk-tuk placards made out of cereal boxes. So there was this atmosphere where we believed in ourselves. We had got together, we became really, really strong, shut down our city. And do you know what? They sat up and took notice in the council. So not to labour the point too much, but the solidarity has paid off, and this was never about greed. It was always delivered with dignity and respect around the members and the claimants. And happy to say that at 5:30 this morning, my best friend, my trade union sister, texted me to say, my money's in the bank. So really the message is, if you want to have a strike, send for the 8,000 angry Glaswegian women and we'll be there.
So, we had Bookmarks Bookshop has come over to Marxism and moved their whole bookshop to Marxism. It's located in People's Palace here and also in the Grand Centre on the first floor. So I think everyone has a leaflet on their desk, on their seats, for Bookmarks, who are doing an appeal which starts tomorrow. They were attacked by Tommy Robinson supporters and street racist movement led by Tommy Robinson, an activist by them. And they're starting a campaign, so please donate and please be a part of the appeal. So, our next speaker, I think I'm so happy to have her, and I think everyone will be inspired too. A revolutionary, and I think we're seeing it and everyone's watching it, and everyone's seeing the resistance and the reality of what's happening in Sudan. So our next speaker is Fina Abdullahi.
I feel I am amongst friends, and I really thank you for the solidarity. It's great. My name is Venus. I see that I was put on the speakers list as a Sudanese revolutionary. Let me start by saying that the real revolutionaries are the young women and men in Sudan, taking on the streets, knowing that they are... knowing that they might not go back to their homes, opening their chest to bullets, shouting Madaniya, which is civilian government, in faces of their killers. The Sudanese youth that are waving a big middle finger in the face of systems of oppressions. Those are the real Sudanese revolutionaries. I send them love, and I wish I can have them all. I cannot speak on behalf of the Sudanese revolutionaries, but I can tell you why I think that the Sudanese revolution is extraordinary. First, we have been waiting for this revolution for so long. I'm 30 years old. My parents and most of my extended family are members of political activists. I grew up listening and taking in songs and ideas about revolution, ideas and hopes for a better, inclusive and united Sudan, where everyone feels part of the nation. Sudanese in Sudan and outside Sudan, in the whole entire world, from different generations, in so many different ways, have been working to bring about change, to bring down the regimes that divided, killed, displaced, and oppressed the people of Sudan for 30 years. And it came. The fierce and brave Sudanese youth brought the long-awaited revolution. I think the revolution is great because the great women of Sudan are in the forefront of the revolution. In all possible and impossible ways, this revolution, from young women leading protests in neighborhoods and main streets, and throwing tear gas canisters back to the police. Grandmothers and mothers opening their homes and feeding protesters. To Awadiya Kuku, leading the union of women food and beverage vendors and building a strong union. To women traveling from different cities to feed and empower the protesters in the sit-in during Ramadan. Brave women of Sudan have always been in forefront of resistance. I salute women in Darfur, in Nuba Mountains and Blue Nile and in South Sudan who have been fighting on so many fronts. I come from these women and I'm so proud to have someone like fire in me. And spread out like wildfire, fueled by hope, anger, and determination. On the 6th of April, after months of pushing and pulling, a lot of mobilization and organization by the young people of Sudan, the revolution managed to topple al-Bashir, Sudan dictator, for 30 years. And the sit-in was created. The sit-in was a glimpse of hope, a window to the Sudan that we dream about. People shared that space. It was a communal space for all Sudanese, where people sang, danced, and thought together. People of all ages and backgrounds shared food, tea, and coffee. There were free clinics, free classes for children who found home in the sit-in. It was a safe space. It wasn't perfect, but there was space for discussions and contemplation. The art was The art that was created in that space was magnificent. It showed how much beauty Sudanese youth can create. For months in the city was my happy place, although I'm miles away from home. The videos and photos from the city reminded me day and night of how much and why I love Sudan and its people. On the 3rd of June, that dream was brutally destroyed when Janjaweed soldiers violently attacked the city, killed, burned, raped, and threw dead and alive people to the Nile. Over 100 confirmed dead, beautiful and young souls were lost. Over 70 confirmed raped women and men. 3 of the women who were raped that day took their own lives. Over 300 are still missing. People are saying that numbers are much higher because there were millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people in that space. But as a friend on Twitter put it, if you believed in the city is now gone. But if you believe in the revolution lives on. Tried to bury Sudanese young people on their dream, but he did not know that they are seeds. Last Sunday, on the 30th of June, they bloomed. 3 weeks after the massacre, with no access to internet, the Great Sudanese revolutionaries showed the Transitional Military Council and Hemeti how deviant and fierce they are. They mobilized for 1 million-person marches, and millions took the streets on that day. I called my friends back home and we cried together. I heard people calling freedom peaceful and civilian. I wish I was there. The revolution is completely peaceful. Not one time since December, protesters threw a fist back. They fed, treated, and stand with the soldiers, the same soldiers that they killed them. They are giving the world a lesson in non-violence resistance. Lastly, I believe this revolution cut across all differences, geographical, ethnic, and religious, which is significant given the history of Sudan. There is a call for a nation-wide disobedience on the 14th of July, so please go shout for that. And the revolution lives on. People of Sudan will not settle for less than a complete freedom. We will not settle. We demand peace and justice. And I believe justice will win. I salute Sudanese resistors. I salute the revolutionists in Hong Kong, Mauritania, Algeria. I salute all people fighting day and night for a free world. Power to the people. Freedom, peace and justice. The revolution is people's choice. حرية, سلامة, عدالة. الثورة خيار الشعب. Thank you.
Well, what can I say? Wasn't it absolutely amazing? We smashed Tommy Robinson in the Northwest. 2.2% is what be quite honest, he's a poster, or was a poster boy, of the far right here in Britain, and we absolutely smashed it. And I want to make it really quite clear, we didn't just do that didn't just happen. It happened because actually events like this took place, you know, we had Marxist last year when people came together, they talked about what needed to be done and why he was such a serious threat. We had the discussions, we had the debates, and we came up with a strategy, so that when he announced he was standing in the Northwest, we were ready. We knew what to do, and we were prepared, and we hit the ground running. But to be honest, I'm going to put my hand up, and I never thought for a moment we would have the impact that we had across the Northwest, and that we were able to do what we did. And I'm really, really proud to say that actually I think we did completely kick him back into the gut where he belongs. We need to do, and I think that's why events like this, Marxist, is absolutely key. It's so important because we can't achieve the stuff we need to achieve if we don't bring people together. I mean, this is an event where we've literally got people coming from across the globe to talk, to share ideas, to discuss, to debate, come up with a strategy. To give you an idea of where we've got people here today, obviously we've got people on the platform, we've got from Spain, but actually we've got people from Goa, we've got people from South Africa, we've got people from Canada, from Italy. They're just a handful of the countries that we've got people here represented, and we've had to pay for those flights, and actually it was the best thing we do because it's so important. Where else do you have these discussions? But also, it's not just about the growth of the far right and the work that we need to do, and all these things are so important, but it's also, this event is also a celebration of what working class people can achieve. You know, the speakers that we've had today, I hope reflect that. Absolutely, where else do we go where you hear people talk about what we've achieved, what the changes and the history that we are making? And I think that's absolutely key. So I'm going to say, I'm here to do the national appeal, and I'm proud to do it because I can't think of a better reason to ask people to dig deep into their pockets. Because the discussions that take place in the next 4 days are absolutely key to the world that we want to create, the change that we want to bring. And I want to also say, you see, we've had to change venues this year, and I think it's great that we did because we have changed the venue because the old venue we normally use, the workers are having industrial action. So in solidarity with those workers, we've moved to this venue. And it is more expensive, and I'm really proud to say that actually the Marxism office have kept the price, the ticket price the same. We haven't raised the price to cover the cost because we know how important it is to keep this event accessible to everybody. So rather than raise prices like I do the other thing, we just ask you all to dig deep into your pockets because it's a really, really important event. It's funded by people in this room. So there are going to be buckets going around, so I'm going to ask you to give generously and give, be fast and quiet because actually the quieter you are, the hopefully not the notes, the chorus or the notes, you can hear the next speaker. Thank you very much.
la oportunidad de estar hoy aquí.
So, in first instance, I would like to say thanks for being here.
Y disculpar que no pueda hablar por mí mismo y me tenga que traducir, pero por desgracia todavía no sé inglés, pero en poco tiempo espero aprender.
And I would like to apologize for not being able to speak by myself. So not just yet, my skills aren't that good, but I will try and learn in the future.
Voy a contar mi historia personal, lo que yo viví y lo que vi en el Mediterráneo.
I'm going to tell my personal story about what I lived and what I saw in the Mediterranean.
En el año 2017, en junio, me embarqué con una ONG alemana para ayudar a las personas que cruzan desde Libia hasta Italia.
In 2006, I embarked with a German NGO to help rescue people who were making the crossing in Libya.
Personas que cruzan desde Libia hasta Italia en unas embarcaciones de una precariedad absoluta.
People who cross from Libya to Italy in very precarious vessels.
Sin ningún elemento de flotabilidad, exhaustos por un periplo de meses de travesía.
With no floating device and very exhausted from months of traveling.
Y la mayoría sin saber nadar.
The majority without any swimming skills.
Distancias que en el mejor de los casos superan los 250 kilómetros.
Distances which, in the best of cases, are over 250 kilometers.
Situaciones que hacían que, si no estuviera la ONG allí en el Mediterráneo, estaban abocados a una muerte segura.
Situations that, if the NGO wasn't there in the Mediterranean, it meant a certain death.
Yo fui como nadador de rescate.
I went as a rescue swimmer.
Pero por desgracia me tuve que convertir en juez.
Oh, but unfortunately I had to become judge.
Cuando 200 personas caen al agua en una embarcación de este tipo, sin saber nadar y exhaustos, como hemos dicho, y sin ningún elemento de flotabilidad.
When 200 people fall in the water, exhausted and with no floating devices or life jackets,
no hay medios materiales ni humanos que puedan socorrerlo a todos.
There's no human material means to be able to save all of them.
Y aquí viene la parte más dura.